All right, this is the way it should be. Pitt, Penn State on Saturday, Heinz Field. We bring in Jim Hammett from Cardiac Hill to help us break it down, Jim, and more so than that, get a feel for what it means for the fan bases. So for Pitt, back when I was growing up, this game was an annual game. So even from a national perspective, these two teams were typically contending teams, really good teams, teams that were on the national radar. So even as a guy who didn't have an interest in it, a rooting interest, still loved to see the game. It was still good for college football. So what does this mean for Panther Nation to finally be playing Penn State for the first time in 16 years?
It's a big deal. It really is. The talk all summer has been about this game, and both teams kind of had to just get through that week one thing. And now the focus is Pitt, Penn State all throughout the state. Even this morning on Twitter, the buzz is already there. It's going to be a sellout game, national TV, all the hype, all the hoopla, it's going to be there. I mean, neither team, to be honest, are probably not going to go 10-2, 11-1, contend for championships. This is, so this game's a little bit more important because it's probably the biggest game of the year for both teams. I don't think either team's going to win their conference. So a lot of bragging rights, a lot of recruiting. You look at the two new coaches, they have to establish themselves. James Franklin has had a bad loss with Temple last year. Narduzzi started strong, then, they lost to Navy in the bowl game. So both coaches have a lot to prove in this game. And just the typical bragging rights itself.
All right, everybody, Jim's on record as saying Pitt cannot win the ACC.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Clemson and Florida State, you watch those teams play. I mean, you just got to be realistic. Pitt could maybe win the Coastal. I won't put them out for that, at least.
Yeah, no question about that. I was just kidding because obviously you're in a logjam, most likely in the Coastal, and Florida State, Clemson, they've distinguished themselves, and until it's proven otherwise. Penn State's got to go through three giants to win just the division. All right, what are we expecting in terms of the atmosphere at Heinz Field? Obviously, that's a Pitt home game, but Penn State, I'm kind of guessing, has a larger fan base. I don't know if they've been diving in on the tickets and what kind of the crowd split looks like.
See, that's kind of been a big topic of conversation, all throughout the summer, is that Pitt had a great effort in selling season tickets, and a lot of the Penn State fans are claiming they bought them. So there's going to be Penn State fans there. I mean, it's inevitable. I mean, it's only 2 hours up the road, so it's going to be close. I think it's going to be like a 70-30 split, but 30% of the crowd's still a large number of people. There's going to be a lot of people wearing blue and white. I mean, they're going to be loud, they're going to be heard, but it's still a Pitt home game. There's talks that Penn State might even have more fans, or 50-50. It just doesn't add up. The math doesn't work, but there's going to be a lot of Penn State fans, and it's going to be a very lively crowd. I'm interested because the game's at noon. Sometimes you get these big 8 o'clock games or 3:30 games, so noon. So everyone's going to have to get up and get moving pretty early on Saturday.
All right, so the Panthers coming off a 28-7 opening win against Villanova. The one thing that struck me from looking at the highlights, the game recap, and the stats is an inability to run the football. Let's see, 261 total yards. Just 86 on the ground. Is that any kind of concern?
I think it's a little bit of a concern, but I also think Pitt kind of kept it very basic playbook-wise. I don't think they wanted to give off a lot for, the coming season against an FCS opponent. And there's also Matt Canada taking over at offensive coordinator. The schemes looked a little bit little different. There's not a lot of tight end, fullback packages. It's just the 5 offensive linemen going against the defensive line. So it's a lot different than what Pitt was running last year under Jim Chaney and even before under Paul Chris. So it looked different. But, the talent's there. We know the offensive line has some All-Americans. James Conner's a good back. Ollison's a good back. So I think they can get it repaired quickly, but it just looked uncomfortable a little bit at times.
And, Jim, really what I should have gotten to next before I dove into the nuts and bolts was the appearance of James Conner on the field. Obviously, just seeing him on the sideline in a uniform is remarkable, but for him to get 17 carries, and then once he scored and the fan base really just responded to that, it had to be something a little bit more meaningful for somebody like you than it is for me, and it's still a great story regardless, but for Panther Nation to see that play out in game one was pretty remarkable.
Yeah, it was definitely, it was a big story of Pitt, but it was one of the big stories of college football. Just seeing him get on the field. When he took the field, there was a big ovation. When he got his first carry, it was a 1 yard run, but there was a standing ovation because that was kind of the moment where he did beat cancer. He was able to get back and on the field, and he didn't have a great game on Saturday. I mean, he had a couple touchdowns, but he was kind of bottled up a little bit. I'm not concerned moving forward. He looked healthy. There was a few times where he was able to break out and show his speed, show his strength. On that first touchdown run, he bulldozed the guy over for Villanova. So it looked like the old James Conner. So I think with more time, more repetition, he might get back to that player he was in 2014.
We see the numbers out of Nate Peterman in game one. How do you feel about his performance and work with the wide receivers?
It was definitely, you're without Tyler Boyd, so the whole dynamic of the passing game has changed. Peterman's a senior now. He's been with the team for a couple seasons, so you expected a little bit more than what you got. Like I said, the new coordinator, just the Villanova opponent, I don't know what it was, but something seemed off. But Peterman did come down with some throws. He was able to find a rapport with some of the new wide receivers. Jester Weah had 5 catches. He was able to find Quadri Henderson. He made some plays. Scott Orndorff, the tight end, had a couple catches. So he was able to break in some new guys into the fold.
So you're riding a win streak in this series, 12-0 in 2000. I expect a few more points to be scored in this game, but maybe not too many points. A couple sound defenses going at it. New quarterback for Penn State and Trace McSorley, who won the job as expected, threw a couple touchdowns last week. Saquon Barkley, obviously somebody to keep an eye on, one of the better backs in college football. So obviously if somebody turns it over 4 times, it's going to be difficult to win. If there's a punt return and another special teams play on another side, all those things aside, they could be crazy. What is the formula for a Pitt win? What concerns you about Penn State?
I think what the strengths of the Pitt team is what they have to do on Saturday. They have to be able to run the ball. They have to establish James Conner and Olesen. Peterman's not going to go out and throw for 30 for 45 with 400 yards. That's just not his game. That's not what Pitt wants to do. They have to establish run. They also conversely have to keep Penn State's running game in check. Saquon Barkley is one of the best backs in the country. They have a freshman, Miles Sanders, who's also expected to play. So Penn State's dangerous in the running game. Like you said, McSorley, you don't know what to expect from him yet. It's his first start on the road. Penn State's offense didn't look all that great against Kent State last week. So, but they can run the ball, and Penn State knows Pitt can run the ball. So it's really going to be about establishing and defending the run.
Yeah. Chris Godwin, Deshaun Hamilton, 2 really good wide receivers as well for Penn State. I'm assuming you guys make your predictions there at Cardiac Hill later in the week, maybe a Thursday, Friday deal.
The guys from Cardiac Hill, we felt good about this game all year long. Pitt opened as a 4.5-point favorite, but it's tense. It's a big game. Everyone's nervous about it. Everyone's been, waiting for this game for, 16 years. All summer long since the Navy game ended. Penn State's been on everyone's mind. So, I think both teams probably feel good about the game. I've heard some Penn State fans said, you guys might get us this year. So, I think everyone's kind of leaning Pitt, but nobody would be surprised if Penn State won or even won by a touchdown or 2.
All right, it's Pitt, it's Penn State. It's the way college football should be in the state of Pennsylvania as both sides get together at Heinz Field. Jim Hammett from Cardiac Hill taking some time out to help us set the stage for the big game. All right, Jim, we appreciate it.
All right, thanks, Mark.